Well, I'm Sean Bryant. I'm the CEO and founder of Bryant's Bridge.
Yeah, and I'm Cole Pavlicek. I serve as the board chair and communications chair for Bryant's Bridge.
We are a housing provider for LGBTQ youth at the moment. We would like to eradicate youth homelessness in Knoxville altogether, of course, along with everybody else. But we're starting with the LGBTQ community because they're the most vulnerable, they're the most abused out in the community and shelters and other places. All of our residents at the moment are trans, and that's particularly been challenging for them. Well, there's a backstory. The Bryant's Bridge is actually based on my life history and my life story. It's based on a gap that happens for LGBTQ youth, especially when they come out to their families. They're often not met with immediate acceptance. In fact, for many, many reasons, they're met with things like, well, you can do that with your life if you want to, just not here, all the way to get out. And it sends them off and derails them from the plans that they may have made for their lives when that happens. Many of them end up in homelessness with nowhere to go. My own story, it's based on the gap that happened when I was outed to my mother. And it wasn't intentional, and we've learned that families don't do that. Most families don't do that just to be mean. They just sometimes don't know what to do, or they anticipate all kinds of consequences. But what happens in that moment is there's a whole world of really, really harmful things waiting for young people out there. And they often fall into that. And drugs and alcohol become a big thing. Sex trafficking, LGBTQ youth are heavily sex trafficked. And so when we know these things, our goal at Bryant's Bridge is to stand in that gap. So we're here to provide long-term housing. They can stay with us from 1 to 5 years, and they can get their lives together with whatever they need. We don't provide those services, but we link with area agencies, like a lot of area agencies. We partner with them to meet their physical health needs, their mental health needs, career development, education, anything that they weren't able to get before they came to us, they can get access to through the network of providers that we work with. Well, we use a housing first model.
Yeah.
We use a very specific model. It's a data-driven model. Housing First has 5 pillars that are really important to it. The first pillar is permanent supported housing without readiness requirements. And that means that's why we give the 1 to 5 years, or until they turn 25. Because our services are for 18 to 24-year-olds. But in order to get one's life back together, there has to be the stability of housing. So we kind of operate on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like the very basic, we offer basic things. So we make sure that there's food in the house. We just walk them through those pillars. But permanent supportive housing with no readiness requirements. That means if you've had a criminal history, you can still come in. If you've aged out of foster care, you can still come in. If just no requirement. And you can live there.
I think the important part with that first pillar too is that that's something very distinct that separates us from other housing models and provides a huge barrier for those who are currently homeless. So, for a lot of other folks, as we talk about, they get immediately sent into emergency services, or they're having other special needs issues that, are being required to have to be addressed before anything else can happen. So, I know for us, a lot of our residents and the conditions that they're in, like that alone provides the next barrier to housing. And so us eliminating that is against the orthodox of everyone else. But it's what leads to their success. So
yeah, I think we have a culture of if you need a place, you got 30 days or 60 days, you can stay here temporarily, and then that should be enough. You should be able to accomplish everything that you need to in that. And it's just not true for our young people. They have too many barriers, especially our LGBT youth. They have a lot of barriers that we often don't think about, and added obstacles. So it takes time, and we believe that it takes time. The second part of the Housing First model is client choice. It's really important to us not to try to choose and demand that they do certain things. That doesn't mean that we don't encourage them strongly to do certain things or help them to identify things. But at the end of the day, we can offer a smorgasbord of services that are out there for them, and they get to choose when and how they do that. It's part of empowerment.
Yeah. Well, it's that mentality of that accountability with it too. So it allows them kind of the room for growth that they're needing, instead of strict, here's how you do it. So,
yeah. And obviously, one of the challenges is we have 7 residents and a house manager in our home. And so living with 7 other people is really challenging. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's a very challenging thing to try to figure out how to assert your own independence, but also become part of a group. And so our house offers that. But as much as possible, we'd like you to be able to have your own choice in that. The third piece of it is that we have a recovery orientation. So we are not interested in going back. We're not interested in putting kids back on the street. We are interested in progressive recovery. And that means that it doesn't mean that it's all like that. It means that there's a safety net when it's like this. And we really, really try not to kick you out of the house. We really try. If you need mental health help, if you need substance abuse treatment, we're going to help you to get those steps. And hopefully you'll be able to return to our house at the end of your treatment time and continue on with treatment. So, recovery orientation, that's the third piece.
Yeah.
The fourth piece is that we use individualized and client-driven supports. So even though we have this whole smorgasbord, every single client who comes into our home, every single person, we do a needs assessment, and then we do what we call a plan, a 6-month plan. And it's basic needs or immediate needs, 3-month goals, and 6-month goals. And then every 3 months we evaluate that. Those clients determine what those needs are. They determine what their goals are. We don't try to influence them in any way around that.
Yeah.
We really just want them to have a safe space where they can become who they are. And with kids in transition, that can be a very comprehensive thing. It can really take over for a little while.
Well, and I think that, sorry to interrupt, but I think that means a lot too with this specific community we're talking about as well.
Yeah.
Is that where that individualized care becomes even more important, because we're having folks who are going through, that need gender affirming care, or that need, we know, when it comes to mental health within the LGBTQ community. And so I think that's a really critical part for our community specifically as well. So,
we do help them from time to time with things like name changes. We have a medical provider who comes to the house. That's so lucky. No one ever gets that.
Yeah.
But we have a medical provider. They come and they provide general practice care, mental health medications, and hormone therapy. So we have that. We're able to offer that, not as a program, but as a service.
Yeah.
And then the last part is related to community integration. So, especially in marginalized communities, it's important that we find safe spaces where we can gather together. And so we do a lot of encouraging of that.
Yeah.
But the end goal before you leave our home is that you have a community of people around you, whether it's, people you've met, that you have a friendship group or a support system, so that you don't just go and are completely alone. So we do things like encourage them to go to Knox Pride, or encourage them to go to South Press, some places in the community, and we often go as a group. From time to time we go as a group. So
I can even speak to myself. This part I think is really critical because, right, that's the feeling that we're all having issues with in this community, is the feeling of being alone, right? Mm-hmm. That's one that we can all relate to and understand. And so it's that getting them to see the representation, getting them into the places where our community can exist safely, is one of, I think, the best things that we do. And I know, even for me, like joining this board, I wouldn't say that I was, really involved, as much as I am now. And even feeling it now and seeing that, coming from South Knox Pride, where we had a few of our residents and ourselves, there, I felt more connected then, just because of being a part, going to these events, feeling comfortable in that space. And so I know how critical it is for them too, and I have all the other boxes checked, in my privilege in having that. And so it's important that they feel that, mm-hmm. and that security. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
And they get that in the house too.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Overall, they are amazing with each other. As challenging as it is, they're kind of in some ways like siblings, and they're young, and so they have their moments. But they really connect with each other, and they would just about die for each other. I mean, they really have that in our house, and that I'm really confident with, and I really like that about our house, because they're very, very different, all of them, yet pretty united. We maintain a pretty long waiting list, and because we only have one house at the moment, and we'd really like to grow that house to more houses, because the need is really great. We do Band-Aids, we connect them. We work a lot with Youth Wins to get them case management services, to get them into some kind of temporary housing, things like that. And we do our best to help our residents move through and out. We were able to serve 10 our first year, right at almost 11, going into the first of our second year. We've only been here 18 months, so we're a very young organization still. But the other thing about our organization that I'd like to tell you about that I hope will help us in the long run is, we're not just a housing first model. This is what makes us really different. We're meant to be an affordable housing model. So we're also evolutionary in the fact that we don't know how long it will take. We're committed to however long it takes. But as our residents begin to get out, get jobs, go into school, get disability for some of them, and as they begin to have income, they pay 1/3 of their income to a maximum of $300 a month. They will never pay more than that, no matter how much they earn. And that creates a system where our house can sustain itself. Nico Clayton, which is Kevin and Shelley Clayton's son, had recently transitioned. When you ask about how Bryant's Bridge came about, this is a really important part. He was going to use it for his high school capstone project and was about to head off to college. And so we were, talking about data, and we were talking about, what do we need in order to start an organization? And all of a sudden, in October, they showed up and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy you a house, and we're going to rent it to you for $100 a month for the first 2 years and see how the organization goes. They did. They bought us this beautiful old craftsman home with plenty of space, completely renovated, so it's a beautiful place. And that, they started the model that could allow us to affordably ask residents for rent that will then sustain it. And it has sustained itself since March.
Good.
Steadily. And when we get to 6 months, then we can say, okay, this house will sustain itself with resident rents. because not all of them are paying, but yet it's paying rent, utilities, and internet, which are the main bills at the house. We have other expenses as an organization, so we definitely still require donations, but our goal is to not.
Yeah.
If all of our houses can sustain themselves, for the most part, and we can work with other partners, then we have something that could end youth homelessness. And then, of course, our goal is to expand to individualized units, because we still need safe places to live as these guys get ready to go onto their own and live alone or live. We want to create spaces and communities where they can feel safe and live independently. Surprisingly, not what I would have thought. You know, I kind of expected when I started this in the beginning, and when I started my own transition, which has only been 3 years ago, a little over, and I didn't do anything to make that happen. I just decided I wanted to become me, exactly who I was. But I really expected a lot of community pushback. If people are pushing back in this particular community, they're not really saying that. So maybe they're silent about it, but we've not experienced death threats or harassment. You know, when the legislation was passed, our residents became fearful and said, we used to fly trans flags and everything out front, and they said, please, John, pull the flags. You know, we're feeling a little scared. And so we did, and now we just look like a regular house, but we have the flags all inside. So when you walk in, you see that, and you know who we are. But
well, I think that speaks to the fact that, you know, in terms of pushback, I think the whole community is facing pushback as a whole. You know, and the state's not, you know, quiet about it, obviously.
Yeah.
And so it's at that such level that I don't even know if we're like on the target list, you know. But I think what's also important is that the house is in South Knoxville.
Wonderful community.
Yeah.
We were at Sono Pride. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Yeah. There's no fear. When we were at Sono Pride, I mean, they just raised an astounding amount of money for us.
Yeah.
But the whole community there that came to Sono Pride was so supportive. There was nothing.
Yeah. And I know with the neighbors and everything else, it's always been
our neighbors
good.
Are great. They interact with us regularly. It's not like they just don't come out or see us. They talk to us, and they know.
Yeah, I think that part is huge with the neighborhood that we're in, and then I think also, you know, we're getting seen and heard from city officials too. You know,
the mayor came to our house and visited us.
Yeah,
that was a nice day, and she's been in favor of that from the very beginning. We're it.
Yeah, I was like,
I
think we're it. Yeah.
I mean, we took the Housing First model because it has good data, although I don't think it's been used for youth very much. We've tried to research that and we haven't found much. It's normally for use for chronic homelessness. But we're interested in those things because we believe, even though our youth have very different needs, we're watching them blossom. Halfway houses are usually they usually have we're a lot like them, I guess, in a sense, but usually they have a specific treatment protocol, like they may be a sober living home, or oftentimes there's a halfway house that when folks come out of prison, it's designed to reintegrate them back in the community, be able to give them job skills, things like that. I think some of those halfway houses actually provide those things. We still maintain that we don't actually provide services. We link. And that's why community is so incredibly important to us. Our tagline is community creates change, and we really believe that there's a place for everybody that comes to Bryant's Bridge in one way, shape, or form. So we...
Yeah, I think it's the way that we interact with the community and how it all supports each other so that no one is getting weighed down, but then I think it's also that LGBTQ lens as well, that when our some of the residents have gone to other places.
Or a halfway house.
Yeah, and the treatment they got was discriminatory. And they're going from one place that kicked them out for who they are to the next, and that's where we stand alone with that as well.
Yeah, that's very true, Cole. Yes. Yeah. We are a safe space. Yeah. And it is our primary goal to be a safe space.